Hello, everyone. Tracy here, your resident business rebel, and you're listening to Digital Business Your Way. Welcome to our special limited series, Launch Style Stories. In this series, we're diving deep into the true stories behind launching, what it's like to find your way the hard way, and what happens when you finally discover a launch style that fits. You'll hear from entrepreneurs who've been through, some miserable experiences, those who are still figuring it out, and those who found their groove and finally feel like they're thriving. Because launching isn't one size fits all, and there's not only one way to do it. And I believe it doesn't have to feel like denying yourself to make money or just feel exhausting and something that you have to get through. This series is all about exploring what works, what doesn't, and how you can cut through the guesswork quicker to find your way and your style sooner. So settle in, because these stories might just change the way you look at launching and your business.
We're all about relationship building in the community building and also in the sales process. I really prioritize having deeper relationships and really pouring into the people in my world and having fewer people maybe, but the people that are there really want to be there. And the people that are on my email list are consciously thinking about becoming buyers, and they're emailing, replying, saying, "Oh, this sounds great, can't wait till doors open."
Today on Launch Style Stories, I'm joined by Natalie Koussa, a podcast guest strategist who helps coaches and online experts become the first choice name in their niche by landing guest spots on the podcast their future clients already love. Natalie has used podcast guesting not just for visibility, but as a powerful launch strategy, one that builds deep relationships, attracts highly engaged buyers, and leads to consistent sales without the burnout of traditional launches. But here's what's really interesting. She doesn't launch all of her offers the same way. In this conversation, Natalie and I break down how she approaches launching her done-for-you podcast booking service versus her group program, how she tailors her sales strategy to different types of buyers, and why the way people buy has shifted. If you ever felt like launch formulas don't quite fit, or you're looking for a way to sell that feels more natural, well, this episode is for you. Let's listen in. Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming back, and to you, Natalie, for being here with me. I'm so excited to have you here, because you have not only become a lovely friend on these little interwebs that we play in, but I've really I've leaned on your experience and all the knowledge that you have around this concept of using podcasting, not just for visibility, but actually for launching and for selling the programs. And I think that is, I find it to be fun, right? Because there's a lot of pressure to pre-create assets and to get all your little ducks in a row. But I think there's something magic about just hitting record, going live with somebody, just showing up and answering questions. And I kind of enjoy that about this podcast stuff. So when you and I were talking on the back end about how podcasting can be used for launching, I was like, can we record this? Can we talk about this? So thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, because it's you're famous for getting entrepreneurs booked on their dream podcast and actually turning listeners into leads. And then you also mentioned how there is a difference between growing your list and actually getting people into the program. And I was like, I liked that intersection, because again, that is the difference between growing your community and actually getting sales, right? And everything that we do here in my little community is we actually talk about the sales part, because there's nothing wrong with having and loving on your community, but we are a business and we need to make it sustainable. So we have to move that into the sales portion. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that you and I really have in common is that we're all about relationship building in the community building and also in the sales process. So I don't know how big your community is. Mine is really small compared to the revenue of my business. And it's because I really prioritize having deeper relationships and really pouring into the people in my world and having fewer people maybe, but the people that are there really want to be there. And the people that are on my email list are consciously thinking about becoming buyers, and they're emailing, replying, saying, oh, this sounds great, can't wait till doors open, or it's not for me this time, but, I'm kind of looking at this for next year, or, there's a kind of relationship there in the sales process that I think if you build your community in ways that aren't as relationship focused as guesting on people's podcasts or, actually having conversations with people, I think it can be, it just, when you're speaking on podcasts, it sets a tone for who you are. And people come into your community already feeling like they know you, because they do, because they've heard your voice, they've heard how you tell stories, they've learned some of your concepts. They get, after they've spent that kind of half hour with you, they really get to know you. So they're coming in really warm and really wanting to be there and really informed and kind of really discerning about how they're spending their time and who they're hanging out with. So, and I think that's, that's exactly the way that you grow your community and how you teach sales as well.
Thank you. Yeah. And that has been like a big part of that ethos, right? Because it's fun and it lets people lean on their own discernment, right? Versus like having any sort of like coercion or force around, I'm manipulating you and you must do these things because I'm churning you through this, mechanical funnel that is so detached from me as a human that, you're just doing these things in like this autocratic way. Right. And instead, it's like, you're listening in on my conversations and we're here talking about these things. And I know that like I'm in your earbuds and you're nodding away and you're like, yeah, that's right. Or you're like, actually, I don't agree. I'm sending you an email and letting you know that, and I love that. That's why I have a very open forum that's like, ask me anything. Like it's on every single link. It's on every single place on my website. I'm like, I want to know what these things are that are going through your head, and that has that kind of place where it's like, what else can I make for you? What else can we talk about? What else can we do? And it lets that creation aspect be very, well, I guess that's why it's called co-creation, right? It lets it kind of be that very, almost like co-conspirator.
Yeah, I love that word.
Yeah, it has that little insideness to it. Yes.
Yeah. And I think the other part of it is that discerning clients get brilliant results. You really see. So I think about this a lot, that we've all noticed a shift in buyer behavior from COVID, and everyone was just at home and had tons of, well, not everyone, but lots of us had tons of time, and, kind of all we were thinking about shifting careers. So we wanted to learn something, just the conditions in so many ways were ripe for the online business space. And now we're in a very different space. People have been burned. People have wasted a lot of money. People haven't got the results that they thought they were going to get, all of that kind of stuff. And I think there's so much chat about, oh, it's harder to sell, or revenue is dipping, or, there's so much of that kind of feeling in the online space. But what the flip side of that is, my revenue has steadily increased over this time. I think because, that doesn't surprise me at all. I think it's because the way that we both sell and the way that we both build relationships really speaks to a more discerning kind of buyer. Mm-hmm. So by the time they've listened to you on a podcast or been in your community or read your incredible emails and really kind of got a sense of not just who you are, but also what are the concepts that you're going to teach? Who are your other clients? What are the kind of results that your other clients are getting? So therefore, what kind of results can they expect? They come in prepared, they come in confident, they come in ready to get to work. And I'm seeing people, 2025 hasn't happened yet, so who knows, but in 2024, my clients were getting better results than ever because they were those kind of clients who were like, okay, I'm not just, I'm not investing in 10 different things at the same time and I'm spread too thin and I have no real idea what my strategy is. I'm just going to try a few things. They're like, no, I know what my strategy is. I'm investing in this thing only, or, a couple of manageable things, and I'm going all in and I'm getting the work done, and then kind of really creating those results. So to me, this shift in buyer behavior, has it made things more challenging? Yeah, potentially, depending how you were selling originally. But has it also created the potential for deeper relationships and better results? Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because that's what's called market sophistication and buyer sophistication. Right. And I did an
Mm-hmm.
episode in season 1 about this, if anybody wants to go back and dig into the geekdom of those words. But it's that kind of place where it's like, this is your opportunity to really differentiate yourself and to really stand out and to understand that this is a natural progression of an area of growth. Right? This is normal. This is not a panic. This is not one of those Chicken Little, the sky is falling situations. This is what you want to see whenever you are in an industry that is actually starting to stabilize and is actually going to have some longevity and be there before it moves up again and moves up again. Right? Because I mean, we're creeping up on the 30 billion, and then we're going to get to the 120 billion. This industry isn't something that is going away. It is something that is progressing, right? So this is normal. And instead of people being like, oh gosh, I want to learn this and I want to learn that and I don't know what else to do and I'm just so excited, right? Those were more like impulse buy behaviors. Right. Whenever you go into a new store and you're like, oh, I just don't know what else this is. And you're like, I'll take this and this and this and this and this. Instead, it's like, okay, I've been here before. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to be a little bit more strategic about what I'm putting into my cart. Right. And the cart isn't just your website. The cart is the entire internet. So that's why it feels a little bit different for everybody. Yeah, because it's like the internet is one giant store and everybody's picking from the aisles, which are the different ones of us, deciding like which ones are actually going to make it in the cart and which ones are we browsing for this time and what's a one day and what's a not for me, right? Because it's actually a beautiful thing when someone knows that it's not for them, because it's going to lead to greater customer satisfaction. It's going to lead to greater loyalty. Right. And just because they've decided it's not for you now doesn't mean they're not recommending you to someone who they're like, oh, gosh, this isn't for me, but it is perfect for somebody else. Right. And that's a great thing. And it's not completely the topic we're talking about. But how can I not clear that up for anybody listening?
That's a great little detail. I loved it. I've learned something today anyway, so that's great.
Yeah, because it's that beautiful progression, and this is where I tell everybody, it's like we have to go back to those foundations of business. They're the same foundations. They're actually the same strategies. The difference is the tactics. It's how we're applying those individual parts that make us us. Right. And that's why I created this whole style series. And it's like, right now we're doing the launch one, but we also have the offer one and the sales one, because it's like, I know I want to get my stuff out there. I know I want to get it out there in an evergreen way. I know I want to get it out there in an on-off way. What are all my options? Right. So in the same way that as a buyer, they get to go into this big store of the internet and pick and choose what they have in their cart, as the creator, as the sellers, we can also walk in and be like, oh gosh, I have all these options. What do I want to pick and choose and put into my cart? And so often we either don't know that that's out there, or we kind of get lost in the flashy, kiosk display at the end of the aisle. That's like, if you want the cleanest, whitest shirt in the world, buy just this one detergent. Right? That's the same way that people advertise their programs. If you want this result, then you have to follow my program and you have to follow it exactly. And it's like, well, hang on, what kind of audience do I have? Is it the same? Am I building the same kind of business? Do I want to run a business like that? Do we have the same kind of offer suite? There's all these little pieces that go into it that determine your own outcomes, but also, is it really going to be what fits you? And instead, it's like, let's appreciate the parts about it that are good, but let's also leave the parts that don't work for us, and let's pick some of the others that do work for us, right? And, and that's some that you have discovered as you have done your, like your society, and also your, like the program that you open and close, right? Because you've done both. You've had, like, I don't want to call it a membership if you don't call it a membership, but like you had the speakeasy part. And then you also have you have a done for you, you have a DIY, like you have all of these different ones. Have you found yourself trying different launch methods depending on the offer? Or have you found yourself trying different launch methods as you wanted to try different things for like your particular season of business?
Both. Okay. I love this question. Totally makes sense. Yeah, I love it. So I sell my Done For You service. That's where I book out a podcast tour for people, very differently to the Speakeasy, which is my group program. So that's DIY. The Speakeasy is Until now, it's been launched, like very kind of strictly open close. And only now it's going to evergreen, and then it's going to have launches. I'm going to do kind of a layered thing. So that's my experiment for 2025. So it's going to be evergreen and a kind of launch thing.
Yep, which
The
works.
Done For You. Yeah. And I think it will really work for my personality and also for my audience. So we can totally dive into kind of why I'm trialing it and, my thinking behind that if you'd like to. But then my Done For You, that's just open all the time, and then when I get fully booked, people join the wait list and they kind of can book in advance. But what I found is that they're very different. I don't want to say levels of business owner, but they have a different level of business is a better way to say it. So they're coming to the decision in a very different way. So people, the typical buyer journey for my Done For You is they hear me speak on a podcast. That's by far the majority of the people that come and work with me Done For You hear me on a podcast. They sign up for my private podcast, which is my opt-in at the end. They listen to one episode and then they open, maybe one or two emails and they book a sales call. So it's a really, really fast buyer journey. And I think part of that is because the service is so dialed in, because they get to know me, hearing me on a podcast, so they very quickly get a sense of whether I'm for them or not. And, they kind of hear some of my concepts and how the actual process will work. But also, they're at a level of experience where they can make these very quick buying decisions because they're not just hearing me on a podcast and thinking, oh, a podcast tour will be cool, let me try that. No, they're listening because they already have podcast guesting on their, in their visibility strategy for the year. So now they're just picking between people and then, who will I choose to book out a podcast tour? So that buyer journey can be really fast.
They're seekers, right? They're seeking out the option that works for them. And they might not have known about you, but they're like, oh my God, this sounds perfect. Like this sounds like the exact cleanest way. Let me validate her by listening to more, by reading a couple emails, by hearing what she says when she's not guesting, right? Like what does she say kind of behind closed doors, by listening to the private version. And then it's like, yep, dope, I'm in.
Yeah. So that's the Done For You. And then the Speakeasy, which is a group program, so DIY, really. People have very, very different, they have a different buying style and they have very different questions. So people that are coming into the Speakeasy, some people still buy very quickly. Some people join my email list and watch a few launches go by and then join when they're ready. And I think the distinction is that when you're in an earlier stage of business, and there are people inside the Speakeasy that aren't like that. There aren't any super early people. Most people within the Speakeasy are at 50K a year and upwards, and some much higher than that. So it's not that they're beginners, but it is that when you're at the kind of 50 to 100 and, a bit above 100 annual revenue, you are still at the stage where you're experimental and you're thinking, okay, cool. So I've tried this kind of visibility or tried this kind of sales process and I loved it. Let me go deeper into that. Or typically what my people say is, I've already spoken on a few podcasts. I've signed a few clients from podcasts, and now is the time to go all in. Now I want your help to really refine my strategy, to really go through my talking points so that when I'm on a podcast, I'm making the most of every single opportunity and I'm creating those bigger opportunities. So there's a different motivation, I think, which then leads to a kind of different buyer behavior in that journey.
Yeah. And so like rightly so, because it's not just like the kind of offer, right? Because in the sense of, evergreen open close versus like always open, but different pathways for your agency side, that's obviously a capacity issue, right? Because the agency has that limited capacity because you are so hands-on, right? So that's going to naturally reach a peak unless you expand the agency, which obviously has a whole other realm of business burdens that it's like, is that even a road I ever even want to consider? Nope. Okay, cool. This wait list, has, it works. Let's keep doing it this way, right? Whereas the DIY side, it's like, okay, that is something that is, we'll use the word simpler to scale. Yeah. So now it's more, do I have the personal energy and capacity to scale it? At what point can I hold this place for them versus I'm needed in the agency side? It's like, where am I having the community manager over here, or do they hold two hats because they also work in the agency side, right? So it's like looking at your back end business structure, and you're like, what needs my attention? Because everything in business has these trade-offs. Sometimes it's budget, sometimes it's capacity, like meaning energy. Sometimes it is just straight up money, and it's like, where am I going to feed this attention, and what am I going to do? Right. So there is that model element for, this idea of always on, always off, kind of open close situation for those binary launch experiences. But I would say more importantly, because that we can be more flex with on the back end, is that audience behavior, right? It's like, what do we need? Like, how long is someone going to wait? Like, how long, like when they're in, they're in. Like, where do we want to hold space for them? And it's like, maybe the container that we thought of just isn't the right kind of container, right? So like, if we think about the DIY side, and you're going, okay, well, I did this open close, but maybe I can have more of like this evergreen style, because you've had people who've probably had to wait lists, and it's like, okay, well, could my conversion rate have been different? Then it's like, maybe I needed to just change the container in order to make my launch style change. Has that ever been, probably not in those words, because those are my weird words, like been that kind of thinking that you've gone down?
Yeah, so it's more that I've been thinking that and the longer you have an offer, the more you get to know your ideal clients and who's a brilliant fit for it, and the more you can really just hone in on those people. So that's been the process over the last 2-3 years that I've had the speakeasy. And my people are really ambitious, they're deep thinkers, and they're also kind of free spirits. Mm-hmm. Like, they are not the kind of people, so the kind of very hands-off evergreen process that you were talking about before, and it's all kind of quite mechanical, and there are deadlines, and my people, they're just like, no,
right.
I'm not, that's not how I want to buy.
Turn off.
That just does not feel good to them at all. So even if it was exactly the same offer, even if they were going to get exactly the same results, have the same experience inside the offer, it's just not a buying process that would bring them into the offer. My people really want to make their decisions ahead of time. Mm-hmm. So in launching, one of the things that I really have learned the hard way is that it's all about pre-launch. It's all about, and not in a hypey, oh my God, this is going to be so amazing, let's do 3 masterclasses and 2 challenges, and not in that kind of pre-launch.
And keep you in pre-launch for eternity.
Yeah, no, not like that. But more, let me design this pre-launch so that by the time doors open, they know the concepts that are inside. They know exactly who this is for and what success they can expect. They know the feeling of it. They know what the curriculum is like, all of that kind of stuff. And they've had every single hesitation. Yeah, but is this for me? Essentially, that's what we're answering all the time in sales. Like, it looks great, but will it work for me? Because whatever their particular situation is. Because I'm different. Yeah, we're all special snowflakes. We are. Right. But answering that question in a million different ways, isn't it? And I found that when I've had a longer pre-launch, I can write all the emails that actually answer those questions, and I can meet people where they are, so that by the time doors open, they're like, great, I can't wait, I'm in, let's go. What, for my community anyway, I don't want people doing is making the decision in that week or so when doors are open. Yeah. So I tend to have a longer pre-launch, and I can hold the energy of a pre-launch so much more easily as well. Like, my capacity to kind of be present and not feel pressured and all of that is so much higher in pre-launch. And then for launch, a week or so feels plenty for me. Even if I've got everything done in advance, even if, that I'm not actually working on the launch when doors are open, a week or so gives enough. I focus on overcoming hesitations when the doors are actually open. And there's only so many hesitations that people have, so a week or so is plenty. And then they're making their decisions in pre-launch, and they feel during the launch, like, I have people coming in sometimes saying, I knew I was going to join, but I was loving your emails, so I just waited till the last day to join because I wanted to see the emails. And, but so the vibe of it is very like, I know I'm in. I'm going to join. Instead of, I think sometimes when you have a shorter pre-launch and people have to connect the dots a lot more for themselves, and then by the time doors are open, there's that deadline. Doors are closing on Wednesday. You know, whether or not you've got extra kind of pressure tactics going, people are really aware of that. So there's a kind of layer of like pressure to their thinking. Whereas I want my people to make their decisions from a place of feeling really peaceful and really just at ease and, yeah, cool, this is going to be great for me. And do investment decisions sometimes feel edgy? Yes, of course. We're never going to change that. And I actually don't think that's a bad thing. But I think that's very different to feeling, oh my God, I've got to make a decision because it closes in 24 hours and I don't know whether now's the right time and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, that's my thinking around it.
Which is fake, right? It's false scarcity. And it drives me nuts. And, you know, and as you were describing your audience, it's like they can smell that. You know, they don't want that kind. They don't want that detachment. Instead, they want that connection, right? And so what you've done is you've blended speed, but also with like an expansive container, right? Because this is something that we were talking about offline that we can bring into here, where you know you've recognized through trial and error, you have recognized where your energy levels need to be higher and where they've dipped. Right. And then that's something that we pull out in your launch style. It's like we help you figure that out without having to go through the trial and error of like an on launch and off launch. But it's like, you know, that you can hold that space and you have that capacity in the pre-launch. So that way during that launch, you can lean into more of those automated processes. You know, you can like have that kind of set system that's like mechanical in the good way, right? Where we're using those automations to kind of be like, this is open, this is closed, this is where I need to step in the human element because I have had that connection, I've had that space, I've done all of this work during my pre-launch time. Versus whenever people feel like they have to do like, you know, this 2-week or 30-day time in pre-launch and that's all they get. And then they have to do a 10-day or 14-day cart open. Oh, no, wait, I was only supposed to do 7-day. Oh, gosh, what am I doing now? Kind of panic, you know, cart open situation. And then they're still holding that live energy. And then it's like, oh, I didn't hit my sales. So maybe I need to write another email and hold this. Oh, wait, now my program's starting tomorrow. Right. You know, and instead it's like, wait, where is this blend? Where is this mix? Where can I lean on things that I can recycle and where I can like use over and over again because my humans need me at this point. And then I can take a bit of a breather at this point. You know, that this part can be that little more rinse and repeat because I am pouring into them over here instead. Right. And for different audiences and sometimes for different offers, but for the most part, it's for different audiences. You have recognized that that's in that pre-launch because your people, they want that fast action with the taster. Right. So you have given that to them during that pre-launch part. So that way the launch part is just that bam, 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 bam. It's like I'm digging the emails, which is the only reason why I haven't bought. But don't worry, I'm here.
Just such a compliment. But yeah.
Yeah. Right. Which also means, hey, these are cool. I can use these again. Right. Mm-hmm. It's like, so I'm not having to retweak them every time. I'm not having to write them live in the moment every time. These are resonating. These are hitting. I'm definitely going to debrief and evaluate. You know, I'm not just going to sit on my laurels, but you know, this is where I can be like, this sequence works because I'm live energy pouring into them over here. We're having these connections. We're talking to people. And I'm curious for you, are you meta? Like, are you having podcast experiences with them? Are you finding they prefer live video? Are you like DM talking? Like, what are those like connections? Is it everything in pre-launch? Is it tailored? Like, what do you play with there?
Yeah, so I use podcast guesting as my lead gen and, you know, my way of community building and my way of meeting other people's audiences and inviting them in. So that's podcast guesting is my main way that I do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I pop up on social, I do a few other things, but podcast guesting works so well for me that that's really where I pull my energy into. So then when people come in from podcast guesting, I've changed recently, actually. So it used to be that I kept it super, super simple and it was podcast guesting and then email. That was it. There was very little else. Okay. And that worked really well because both of those play to my strengths. I write really good emails. I'm a decent podcast guest. So, you know, they really, I suppose because both are relationship builders, aren't they, in a bit of a deeper way? You know, you have, they're both more long form. Mm. Yeah, and intimate. Yeah. So that was how I used to do it. That worked really well. And then over time, I've layered in extra connection points. So I think of them as like trust touch points. Yeah. That's what I call them. So every kind of layer is another opportunity for you to meet people where they are and meet them how they want to experience the launch. So first I layered in my private podcast, which worked so well. The conversion rate for my private podcast is amazing. It's I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but even with a very few number of people going through, it makes like a really disproportionate amount of sales.
So is this a second one from, because you mentioned a private podcast for the agency side. So is this also one on the DIY side?
The same one.
Okay.
It's exactly the same one that people come through. Yeah. So it shares some of my concepts and it talks about the results that you can expect and kind of different results for different business models and all that kind of thing. I've actually got a new private podcast. It's going to flip slightly. And the new private podcast is called Tap Into Trust: How to Bring 100 People into Your Community on Repeat by Speaking on Podcasts. Nice. So it's going to be a lot, actually, it reflects a lot of the kinds of things that we're talking about, like, changes in buyer behavior and why long form content and intimate content and world building content, meets people where they are. So that was the first layer that I put in. And then only pretty recently, actually, I've started playing around with doing like micro trainings that are on demand and live masterclasses and really kind of showcasing my teaching style. Yeah. And that has had an incredible impact on the group program. Yeah. Because I think it's just that extra level of, there are some people out in these online streets that are incredible marketers, but they're much stronger marketers than they are teachers or coaches or, and that's fine in lots of ways. Like that's just their strength. So hopefully they've got a business model that kind of supports that being their strength. Yes. That's not my strength. I'm better in reverse. I'm more confident within my group program. I prefer smaller spaces. I really like going deep with people. I really know every single person inside the speakeasy. I know their business model. I know who they are. I really kind of connect with them on that level. So I think for me, layering in different kinds of experiencing how I teach and experiencing what it's like to be in a group is really helpful, because the more in depth we go, the stronger I get. So people kind of get to see actually me at my best. Whereas for lots of people, them at their best is a big masterclass or a bit, Instagram where it's all kind of quite fast moving. Mm-hmm. And that's incredible, but that's just not my strength. So the more that I lean into my strength in launching, the better it's doing and the better people are responding.
Right? Because you are that magic part. It's like, where is it that I can really bring that energy, that I can bring that flair and that style, but it also shows people what it's like to work with me. So it's like, what does this container look like? What are they going to experience? And how can they have some of that now? Mm-hmm. Because then they know what it's going to be like inside the container, right? Because we don't want them to have that whiplash effect and be like, wait, who is it? Wait, what did I buy? Who is this person? Refund. Yeah. Like, hang on, what's going on, right? And instead it's like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. I'm learning so much from her. And that's the true variation of, oh, if I'm learning this much now, what much more am I going to get later, right? Is one of the biggest things I teach people is to actually sell with the how. Do not hold that back, because the key is actually the now what. Because that's what creates that loyalty and that longevity. Because if they're getting some of that taste or some of that how with you now, then they're like, oh my gosh, if I can get this win, if I can do this, now what's going to happen? Now what's next? Because there's always another how. There's always a deeper, right? And a more and a more and a more. And like you and I, we both work with more experienced entrepreneurs. We're not like, yes, people who are newer, they're always welcome to come to us. But the people that we typically work with and that, we are aiming for, I guess you'd say, are more in that, mid, right? They've been around a while. They've tried a lot of things. They have that experiences under their belt. And so they're a bit more honed in on what they're looking for, right? And so they're like, I need something different, or I'm after this. You're the one that's going to help me do that. And so they're seeing that, oh, okay, we're not just a shiny post. Oh, we're not just a soundbite. Oh, we're not just a this, because they're getting all of those. And you have found that by doing this like trial and error with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the more experience you get, the more you understand that the benefits and the real success don't just come from understanding the framework or even understanding why you're doing it in those ways. It comes from the nuance of somebody being able to tweak the framework to fix, to meet where you are.
Yes.
And that's exactly, I mean, you do it so explicitly in all of your work. I do it more implicitly. So within the speakeasy, of course, there's a framework. Of course, it takes people through, here's how to find the right podcast. Here's how to pitch. Here's how to show up as a brilliant guest. Here are the messaging points that will help you tell brilliant stories and help you move people closer to you. But they're never just, it's not one and done. It's not just churning out carbon copies of, okay, tick, 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 I've done ABC. Right. Of course it's not that. And I think more seasoned entrepreneurs really understand that. They're not looking for the secret thing or the one thing that's going to change their trajectory. They really understand that at its heart, entrepreneurship is about getting your messaging right, about knowing how to get in front of the right people, about having a sales process that works. It's all the fundamentals that when you tweak one, it lifts everything.
Yes.
And so that's what people are looking for. And I think that's what we can reflect in the sales process as well.
Yeah. And that's been a lot of, it's a lot of fun. Like that's part of that micro action strategy that I talk about. I bring those elements into all of the programs that I do, right? Where it's because entrepreneurship is experimenting. It's what we do. And that's a lot of that stretchiness and the thing that we need to get comfortable with. Probably more than anything, right? It's like we're always figuring it out, we're always trying to see what it is, but how can I figure it out quicker? Like what's the thing where it's like, oh my gosh, if I just slightly turn this dial, then it just like hits all these other things, and so I'm curious, like, because we talked a lot about how you do the launching, but since you're helping people with their launching with it, right? Using this as like a pre-launch style, what have you seen in like hesitations and when they've done that little stretch, when they've turned that little dial and they've given it a go? Like, what have you seen inside of your program where they're like, oh my gosh, now that I've tried this, like I wasn't sure, but I wanted to go all in. Like I had this feeling. Now I've seen it out there in the world. I'm so glad I've done it. Like I've made these little tweaks. I've done these little changes. And now this has been like really amazing.
Yeah. So for people that are still at that experimental stage of launching, and to be honest, I think everyone is. I think even when you look at the huge industry leaders, if you follow their launches, they do change. Some aspects launch to launch, even though there is a repetition there. We're all, as you said, entrepreneurship is about being experimental. And even if you find something that works incredibly for you, you can't stand still because the market shifts and other people start doing what you're doing because they see it's working well. So then it becomes normal. And, there's all the things, everything shifts around you, doesn't it? So you can never stand still in entrepreneurship. You've always got to be pushing the boundaries and experimenting and trying something new. So when people come to me and they want to layer in podcast guesting into launching, typically the kinds of hesitations they have are, will this be strong enough so that I can lean back from social? That's like a really common one. That social isn't meeting my people where they are. It's not growing anymore. It's not working for lead generation. It's not even really working for nurturing anymore. So I need an alternative for that. And for that, I mean, spoiler, yes, podcast guesting works incredibly well for that. Because if you think about it, you're literally, every single time you speak on a podcast, you are getting personally introduced to that host's community. Mm-hmm. And that host has been, like, hosting a podcast is not an easy thing to do. It takes time, energy, money. Podcast hosts pour into their community. And you end up with this very trusting relationship between the host and their community. That's why if you look at the stats, podcast listeners are so loyal. They want to listen to the same show at the same time, or even if it's not the same time, in the same kind of habit. They'll have a particular show they love listening to at the gym, another show they love listening to when they're folding the laundry or walking the dog. It's all kind of very, we listen to podcasts in a very intimate way. They fit into our lives in a really intimate way. So when you speak on podcasts and you get personally introduced to their listeners, there's that transfer of trust that happens immediately. The host is basically saying, hey, meet this person. I think they're cool. You will too. Yeah. Like I met my husband by getting set up. One of our mutual friends said, do you want to meet my friend? I think you'd really get on. And, it's exactly the same thing.
Classic,
it's kind of
right?
similar. Yeah. So there's that. So there's always this real strength of relationship that happens. The other thing about podcast guesting, and this can be really helpful with launching, is in those moments where you're tweaking your messaging and you're kind of thinking, last time this particular messaging worked really well, this pillar didn't work so well, how do I tweak it? When you're speaking on podcasts, it's in conversation. Yes. So it never comes out the same twice. Right. Anyway, like, you don't want to be a robot. It's not about, learning your talking points and off you go. It's not a lecture. It's a conversation with the host. So it gives you this really supportive, really kind of open space to just play with your messaging. And every single time you speak about it, even if you're like the actual messaging is dialed in, the stories that you tell will come out slightly differently, or the questions that the host asks will help you think about it in a slightly different way. So every single time you speak on a podcast, you're developing your messaging.
Yeah, which is, it has that ability then to like cascade into other areas. Right. And Absolutely. It grows that confidence too, because you're like, oh, well, that was, how did I even just say that? I really liked that, And it has kind of those little fun things, or it's like, oh, okay, that was a little wonky, or that didn't work really well. I need to, kind of try that again, or I need to see, how that was. And I liked that.
That's right.
Right. So we're talking about like a lot of the parts on your launch style is talking about how you want to actually go into the selling of it, right? But as you and I know, because we've done this before, and as hopefully most of the listeners know, launching is just another word for promoting. So that actually does include the promotional part in the beginning, the pre-launch, right? It includes the brand awareness building that you're doing all the time around it, right? And it includes the actual selling portion. So we use this term launch to really mean a very long period of time. Yeah. So something that will happen inside of your launch style is people like you will come in and you'll guest coach and you'll have like wonderful times with my humans. But if there was like a tip that you had for those who are listening right now, maybe it's around like the timing, like when do you even do this? What's the most important thing? Or if it's like, I'm still not sure, this hesitation, like what is something that you would love to leave people with around, using this tactic? Because they're like, oh gosh, this sounds fun, but now what, how, right? Like it sounds fun, but also a little intimidating. Like how, what would you love to tell them?
Great. So I'll give the perfect answer, and then I'll give and if that doesn't work, you can do it this way.
The reality answer.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Let's start with perfect. Yeah. So if you've launched a few times before and you have a sense of how long typically the buying journey is. So what's the gap between somebody joining your email list and then joining your offer? We want to know that time frame. If you know that time frame, you want to be speaking on podcasts 4 to 6 weeks before that, just so they have time to. So obviously you record, you pitch, then there's going to be a little gap, then you're going to record, then there'll be a little gap, and then it'll come out. What I have found is that if you just say to hosts, hey, I'm opening doors for my offer on whatever date, they're typically so happy to bump your episode if they can. If it's doable within their schedule, they'll just bring your episode forward. So always ask, with an open mind, let them say no if it's not going to work. But so you want to be speaking on the podcast 4 to 6 weeks before that moment where you want people joining your list. But then I will say as well, that what I see is that if somebody joins your list from hearing you on a podcast, they have a much shorter buyer journey. So, I'll give you the figures from, I'm a real geek. So if you want the stats, I'll give you the stats from my business, because I've actually just been looking at this. So if somebody finds me from social media, it typically takes 100 days for them to then work with me. Whereas if they find me on a podcast, it takes 30 days on average.
Right.
So it's like 3 times faster. Yeah. So all that to say, don't discount it. Don't, if the timings that I've just given you thinking, oh my God, that's never going to work, just pitch a couple of podcasts, just get started with it. And then you can go all in on a full podcast tour for the next launch. So that's the perfect way. The imperfect way is podcast guesting is evergreen. That's one of the real benefits of it. And one of the real benefits of being a guest is once you've recorded that episode and it's out there working its magic, you can promote that episode whenever you like. So it doesn't have to be a fresh episode to get fresh people listening to it. You can just wait until that moment where, 6 weeks before or whatever, and you can start re-promoting podcasts that you've spoken on. So you kind of create a secondary podcast tour without having to do new episodes. So that's what I'd recommend. It can be so much easier than people think it is.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And one of the techniques that I personally use, and that I actually started using because of guest coaching and teaching, is like not just sending people to a specific like freebie, but I actually use a specific page where I can play with the freebies that are showcased. Right. So I call it my connection page. And I have like a little QR code for it, but that also is like a way to help make it a bit more evergreen, right? So maybe you're like, oh, okay, well, we talked about this one and I gave this link, but now I feel really awkward because maybe I'm not showcasing that one, or maybe the URL has changed, or oh gosh, do I go back to the host and do I give them ask them to change my links and all the things, or do I try to go into my internet world and fix it, and I don't know what to do, right? And it's like, okay, well, what are ways where we can actually make it streamlined? What are the ways that we can actually make it? So knowing your numbers, finding your data, realizing that this is a before thing, right? Because we are talking about building brand awareness all the time with it being evergreen, right? And that's another, it's like, where are these places where we can make this work for you instead of us trying to juggle more things and thinking, how do we do this right? What do we do? And it's like, okay, well, what if I had this one page? And then I can play with the things otherwise, right? And those kinds of things are fun little ways, that we get to play with it.
Oh, it makes life so much easier. And a little tip for that page, because I teach the same thing and I do the same thing.
Look at us being the same, right? Go figure.
I
know, like, imagine.
Is have it as simple as you can, as memorable as you can, especially if you're sharing it on podcasts. Not everybody that's listening is going to be bothered to go into the show notes and click and all that. So what you should do, if you want to make it really simple, is just have, so for me, nataliekoussa.com, whatever your website is, / and then just use one word and have that word as something your people want. Because it kind of sparks like I actually want to click that. So mine is nataliekoussa.com /visible.
Nice.
That's the one. I've shared that on pretty much every single podcast I've ever spoken on. And of course it changes. And of course, when, I might have been promoting something a bit different 2 years ago, of course, than I am now. But if people, speaking on podcasts and building relationships creates so much leeway when you're not in that transactional, okay, here's a Facebook ad, now I'm promising you this specific thing, and then and people can feel that it's very automated and transactional. It's the absolute opposite of speaking on podcasts. When they get to know you and then they get to the landing page and you said it was a private podcast about XYZ, but actually it's a private podcast about the new thing, they're like, cool, they're doing something new, let me sign up.
Right.
It kind of takes the pressure out of it. It creates a bit more humanity and a bit of like understanding that things change and we develop and we want to share something different.
Exactly. Yes. And that is the beauty of it, is that our businesses evolve and they're not pivots. It's not, burning everything to the ground. It is a natural evolution of growing and experimenting with what we do. And hopefully for you listening, that hearing how, Natalie has found their style, it shows you how important that it is to find what works for you and what works for your audience, and that beautiful intersection of knowing those things. And if you've been feeling stuck, I just feel like I keep going back and forth and I'm not really sure what to do anymore. Well, that is exactly what your launch style was made for. And I would love to have you in that program. So it is tracypatterson.com /yourlaunchstyle. And the spots are open and we will be there, and there will be more to this limited series. But in the meantime, we hope to see you again soon. And thank you so much, Natalie, for being there.
Thank you, Tracy. It's been a fab conversation.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Launch Style Stories, and I hope it sparked something for you. If you've been listening and thinking, I need to find my way to launch without burning out, second guessing, or forcing myself into someone else's formula, well, that's exactly what Your Launch Style is here to help with. Inside the program, we cut the trial and error and help you create a launch approach that fits your strengths, your business, and your energy, so selling never feels like an uphill battle again. Head to tracypatterson.com/YLS to learn more and join us. And if you loved this series, let me know. Share your biggest takeaway, DM me, or leave a review. It helps more business owners like you find the show. I'll see you inside your launch style.